Good evening, everyone. I'm Dean Meminger, and as we gear up for Election Day on Tuesday, today marked the end of early voting. The polls closed at 5 o'clock. As of the latest data from the City Board of Elections, a total of 735,000 New Yorkers cast their ballots during the early voting period. Brooklyn is in the lead with more than 243,000 voters, with Manhattan trailing behind. Now, as a reminder, Election Day is this Tuesday. We have team coverage tonight on everything the candidates have been doing on the campaign trail on this final day of early voting. Bobby Kuza has been following Zohran Mamdani and Ayanna Harris. She's been keeping up with Andrew Cuomo. We also have been covering Curtis Sliwa. Good evening to the both of you. Let's start off with the numbers. I mean, people across the 5 boroughs really got out there to vote in early voting,
Yeah,
Ayanna.
Dean, these numbers are significant. 735 New Yorkers voted early during this early voting period. Let's jump back in time, go back to 2021, when it was a general election. At the time, it was Mayor Eric Adams was the Democratic candidate. Republican Curtis Sliwa was running against him. For the entire early voting period, only 169,000 people voted early. So compare that. We have quadrupled the early voting total this year. 169,000 voted early in total back in 2021. This year, 735,000 New Yorkers have voted early. So quadrupled the turnout. And we saw, what was interesting to see is we saw that very heavy turnout during the Democratic primary from younger voters. During early voting, we saw a larger turnout, a strong turnout from people over 50. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not the ages will even out a bit more once we get in all of the numbers, including people who voted on Election Day. But this is significant. And
we know that older voters are, that Andrew Cuomo does better with older voters, whereas younger voters have really broken in huge numbers from Mamdani and are very enthusiastic. So, you know, early on when we saw those numbers coming in from early voting, there was some thinking, oh, this is a good sign for Cuomo, but it's really hard to know for sure. We'll find that out.
I will also note some of the neighborhoods that we've seen a strong showing during early voting have tended to be neighborhoods that Andrew Cuomo has done better in. Neighborhoods like the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, both of those neighborhoods had hour-long waits in some places, you know, during this final day of early voting. So it will be interesting to see if Andrew Cuomo is able to pick up some momentum. He's pointing to this early voting turnout as saying, I can close the gap and squeeze out a win after Election Day. And he's pointing to specifically these early voting numbers. Of course, we know a little bit of demographic information about who's voting early, but we don't know who they're actually voting for.
All right, so early voting is done. That's a wrap. It's in the books. Election Day Tuesday. Now, Bobby Kuza, you've been following Mamdani. He is the Democratic nominee. In the polls, he is leading by big numbers. So what's the deal with him? Over the weekend, he was really out there.
I mean, just this weekend, he has been keeping up a frenetic pace. I mean, just last night, he was at nightclubs in Bushwick. We saw these videos on social media. Today, he was at a black church in Harlem. He went to the marathon route and took the mic and was, you know, rallying his supporters there. Later on, he went to a bar in Astoria with Governor Kathy Hochul and some other elected officials to watch the Bills game. So that was kind of a show of political force, showing up with the governor. And then he was at an event in Harlem where he was rallying some supporters who were going to go out canvassing. And while he was there, he actually took some questions from reporters. He was asked, what's the first thing you're going to do if you're elected mayor? And of course, he fell back on his usual talking points about affordability and the big planks of his platform. Here's some of what he had to say earlier.
My focus, I've delineated from the first day, freezing the rent for rent-stabilized tenants, making buses fast and free, delivering universal child care. The first order of business is starting to ensure that the Rent Guidelines Board is a board that actually acts upon the data it's being given, not the directive from the mayor to try and reward his donors.
So, you know, this is maybe the easiest of his campaign promises to fulfill early on, because in order to get universal child care or free buses, that is going to take hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, really, and a lot of negotiation. Freezing the rent, he can do simply by appointing new members to the Rent Guidelines Board that are more inclined to freeze the rent, although that vote happens later on in the year. So I think we're going to see that near the top of his agenda if and when he wins and takes office in January.
I will note that out on the campaign trail, Andrew Cuomo has been attacking all of Zohran Mamdani's campaign promises, including the freeze the rent promise. And Andrew Cuomo is arguing that you can, yes, select and appoint particular people to the Rent Guidelines Board, but you can't force them to vote a particular way when it comes to whether or not there should be a rent freeze. So he's saying you don't truly have the power even over a rent freeze. That's part of the message that Andrew Cuomo has had out on the campaign trail in recent days, Dean.
And, you know, he was in the Bronx today, right? In Little Italy, the Belmont neighborhood.
Yeah, Andrew Cuomo stopped by Arthur Avenue, spent some time there. He was very warmly received at the little cafe that he stopped into. And he sat down and had a conversation with some local supporters. You know, they spoke about issues, things that are going on in the neighborhood. Andrew Cuomo, he opened up about his vision for New York City, and he also stopped by 2 churches in the Bronx where he continued to lay out his message. Andrew Cuomo has been insisting that this race is really about who has the right vision for the next steps of New York City.
There's no disagreement as to what the problems are. We need to build affordable housing. We need public safety. We need to create good jobs. We know the problems. The question is, who has solutions that can actually work, and who has the ability to make those solutions a reality?
And Dean, Andrew Cuomo out on the campaign trail has also had a message that's also been a bit more tailored to Republicans in New York City. He appeared on the right-leaning Fox News channel earlier today. He did an interview there with Maria Bartiromo, and he spoke about ways in which he might be able to actually collaborate with President Donald Trump if he is to become mayor. So Andrew Cuomo, I did ask him about this earlier this week. You know, you've been a Democrat all your life. Now you're running as an independent. Now you seem to be reaching out to Republicans. How do New Yorkers approach where you are on the political spectrum? And he said, I'm all of the above, and that he's running to be mayor of New York City. And when you are mayor, you're mayor for Republicans, for Democrats, and for independents.
Check all of the boxes.
Yes.
You know, let's switch gears to Curtis Sliwa, everyone, because he's been active on the campaign trail over the weekend. The Republican candidate was in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn on Sunday. He's been looking to energize city Republicans, some of whom, as you heard Ayanna say, they are now backing Cuomo. But Curtis Sliwa was saying, you know what, he is the candidate you should choose if you're worried about public safety and fighting crime.
I'm a street warrior. I'm the street guy. I patrol the subways. I campaign in the subways. I'm always in the street. If you blink, if you show fear, you're dead. So many of our friends and neighbors have shown that fear, hysteria, and fright to Zohran Mamdani and the Zohranistas that they've already translated to them. You've won and I'm out of here.
They're continuing to campaign, but also trying to bring in big names. Over the weekend, we know Zohran Mamdani spoke to former President Barack Obama. Cuomo has been seen with Mayor Eric Adams this weekend.
Yeah.
And Curtis Sliwa on Staten Island, I believe, over the weekend, he actually had a Zoom meeting with former Mayor Rudy Giuliani saying, vote for Sliwa.
Yeah, this is crunch time. This is when it's all on the line. This is when they are out there voting for each and every vote. We know through recent polls that there aren't a whole lot of undecided voters left here in New York City. But for the few that are up for grabs, we are seeing them all aggressively go after them. Also want to mention, earlier this week, Andrew Cuomo was in Brighton Beach with Councilmember Ina Vernikov. She's a Republican. So that just goes to show you that, you know, all of these candidates are really trying to find votes wherever they can.
Now, we don't have too much time left, but I want to talk a little bit about their campaigning and their advertising. A lot of people saying, like, this was very nasty. Even people claiming there was some hate towards Muslims and Zohran Mamdani during this campaign. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of instances, I think, just in the last couple of weeks where Andrew Cuomo has gone very negative in these closing days. And there have been instances where he was appearing alongside interviewers or supporters who were saying things that were, you know, I think pretty fairly interpreted as being Islamophobic, and Cuomo didn't always push back. So that has been a real line of criticism. He then says, I'm not the one who's being offensive, it's Zohran Mamdani who's the offender because he has said things that have been interpreted as anti-Semitic, and he says Mamdani has been offending other communities, black communities, LGBT community. So we've got this back and forth and a lot of negativity as this campaign comes to a close.
All right, we have been covering it all. Bobby Kuz, Ayanna, Harry, thank you so much. All right, now it's time to turn things over to Studio A for the rest of the hour with our New York One political anchor, Errol Lewis, and the rest of the New York One political team. They will bring you all that you need to know about the race for mayor ahead of election night. Errol.
Thanks, Dean. Coming up, I'll be joined by New York One political director Bob Hart to break down the historic nature of this election. And then we'll bring you some of the best interviews we've done with the candidates for mayor out on the campaign trail. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay with us.
Every day tells a new story. At Mornings on One, we're dedicated to bringing you the stories that matter most to start your day with in-depth coverage of the day's developing news.
I'm Pat Kernan. Here are the stories we're following this morning.
And weather updates every 10 minutes.
Some morning sunshine possible, clouds take over.
It's our responsibility to get you the information you need before you head out the door. Mornings on One, weekdays starting at 6 on the Spectrum News app. Free for Spectrum customers.
Spectrum TV, isn't that only live TV?
No, it's only all my favorite streaming apps with live TV.
Okay.
It's only all included at no extra cost. And that's the magic of math. Will this be on the test? Sure. Why not?
It's only one simple payment for all our TV. We gotta simplify and win. Winning is equally important.
If not, more so.
Yeah!
Only Spectrum TV, fixed TV.
I'm Sandra, this is Jorge, and we were adopted in 2019. I remember when they first came to us, Michael was already a teenager. The whole cliche of they're so lucky to have you guys, and it's the other way around. They have changed our family for the better. They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
And that's a look at some of what's in the papers this morning. You're done with the sports section.
Today's story is about the latest chapter for a beloved local business.
It's a beautiful day with temperatures in the 60s, but showers are expected in the next hour.
In a city that's always on the go, it's important to stop to hear the stories that connect us.
The news that matters to New Yorkers. That's what brings us together. That's Mornings on One.
Weekdays starting at 6.
Exclusively on Spectrum.
Welcome back to our special coverage this evening ahead of Election Day. I'm Errol Lewis. 3 new polls were released this week showing Zohran Mamdani maintaining a lead over Andrew Cuomo. Here's a closer look at the numbers. The Emerson poll has Mamdani at 50%. Another poll from Marist University shows Mamdani up 16 points over Cuomo. And a Quinnipiac poll shows a tighter race with a 10-point lead for Mamdani. Curtis Lewa remains in 3rd place in all 3 polls. Now, if elected, Mamdani would make history as our city's first Muslim and first South Asian mayor. He would also become the youngest mayor of New York City since 1892. New York One political director Bob Hart joins me now to talk about that and more. Good evening, Bob. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
On the other end of that age question, Andrew Cuomo or Curtis Lewa would be the oldest mayor we've ever elected.
The oldest elected, yeah. There's a lot of contrasts in this race. And we're going to get some first no matter who wins, for sure.
As far as immigrant mayors, I remember there was a string of mayors probably in the 19th century who were all from Ireland. But it's been a while, or has it, since we've had an immigrant?
It has been a while. Abe Beame, who is a mayor in the 1970s, was actually born in London. His parents were fleeing Poland, were in England briefly, and so as a baby, Beame lived there before they moved to New York City. But then you could go back to Mayor Impellitteri, who is from Italy. But again, as a baby came here. The last real one was Mayor William O'Dwyer. He was elected in 1945 and 1949. As a young man, he moved to New York City, where he became a police officer from Ireland.
Oh, very interesting. This race has made history a lot of different ways. One involves money, though. I was surprised to hear that this might be the most expensive race in history, even after the Bloomberg years, when the billionaire Mike Bloomberg was putting hundreds of millions of dollars into his various campaigns.
It was a Bloomberg money boom for consultants, and I went back and crunched the numbers. And in the last Bloomberg election in 2009, $118 million was spent total. 109 by Bloomberg, 9 million by Democrat Bill Thompson. This race is set to break that, and part of it is because we have a lot of independent expenditure contributions going on in this race that we haven't seen in the past. So between the hard money from the candidates and the contributors to the soft money, this will almost definitely break that record from 2009.
So yeah, there's a lot of spending. I know a lot of our viewers will say, well, hey, you're in commercial television, you're getting a lot of that in the form of ads, which is probably true, but they spend a lot of money on a lot of other things as well.
Absolutely, on consultants, on polling, and it's all public record, so you can go and see what they spent it on. And you'll see some of them are much more efficient than others. And there was a lot of money spent by Democratic candidates who we're not talking about now, and that's why that number is so high as well.
Let's talk a little bit about Andrew Cuomo. He's a former governor, and I didn't really think about it, but it seems, is it rare or is it unique that a former governor is trying to become mayor?
At least in modern times, since the city was consolidated, it is unique that we have not seen a former governor do this. I'd have to dig back maybe in the 18th century or early 19th century. It does remind me a little bit of John Quincy Adams, that after when he was president, he went back to the House of Representatives. And this is sort of what Cuomo was doing, was trying to have a little bit of a redemption tour. And we'll have to wait and see whether it takes on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's interesting that he chose this office to run for, because there was speculation that there have been some openings in Congress and so forth, and that was certainly something that was available to him.
Andrew Cuomo loves being an executive. You and I have known him for decades. He likes being in charge, and I think that's why this job was appealing for him. Even though he hadn't lived in New York City proper for a while, he dealt with the affairs of New York City constantly as governor of New York for 10.5 years.
One last thought about Mamdani. As he has gotten closer to victory, or a possible victory, his stance on different issues has kind of shifted coming down the home stretch here.
Well, you noted that really well in the debate, where things were very clear in the Democratic primary. They're much more opaque now. I'm still not sure what his education position is, or Jillian Jorgensen did a wonderful job looking at all of their positions. His, to me, is the most fuzzy. And I think when you're the front runner, you suddenly become more political. And that, I think, damaged his political brand a little bit in this general election.
Okay, thanks very much, Bob. Over the past couple of months, New York One has been going into different neighborhoods around the city and asking voters what their top concerns and issues are. Here's just some of what we have heard from them, starting in Washington Heights in Manhattan.
Starting in the 1980s, migrants from the Dominican Republic began settling in large numbers in Washington Heights. And now,
people are living in fear, afraid to even go out. People have lost their jobs, not showing up to the workplace because they're afraid that ICE might pick them up and take them to 26 Federal Plaza.
From the homeless shelters to the jails, I mean, the South Bronx is always the place for the services.
Data from NYU's Furman Center show Mott Haven, with nearby Melrose, as the fourth biggest non-white community in the city, with a majority of Hispanic and Black population. In 2023, the poverty rate was over 36%, almost double the city's 18% overall average.
It's frustrating. I get frustrated. We don't have much. But what we have is priceless. Because the love and the heart, you see our heart. Right. You can't get that anywhere else. You can't buy that.
Yes, this is absolutely iconic. We've been here for 50+ years. My mom has served the community for a really long time. And it's beautiful to know that she's actually still here and has beat gentrification to its finest.
Williamsburg is now one of the most expensive neighborhoods to rent an apartment in Brooklyn. The median price for a one-bedroom, $4,630 a month.
So, of course, housing is a major issue. I mean, families are priced out. There's no, even when you can find an apartment, if you only have a one-bedroom, a studio, and your family grows, there's no way to stay here. So many families, unfortunately, have to leave the city, although they love the city and they want to stay here.
Off Roosevelt Avenue, there is a different type of fight happening.
We should be focusing on education, on health care, child care. Our tax dollars should not be invested on prostitution.
Last October, Mayor Adams launched a specialized task force to address the issue. A year later, City Hall says major crime has dropped nearly 35%.
Jackson Heights is one of the most diverse immigrant communities on the planet.
From the sights and sound of the area to the food.
In my guards, I thought, somebody has to open the door for Bangladeshi food.
For generations, Tottenville has been a place where working and middle-class families have been able to afford a home of their own. But many fear that dream may be slipping away.
It is very expensive, and it's very hard for new couples to purchase homes and just afford life in general. It's difficult.
We're losing the next generation to other neighborhoods, primarily in New Jersey, because our children can't afford to live here.
And if you'd like to watch any or all of these stories in full, you can head to ny1.com or the Spectrum News app. Or go to our voter guide, where you can also access more election coverage, including what you can expect on your ballot and much more. We're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll dive into why housing affordability has become one of the biggest themes of the campaign this year. We'll bring you highlights from my conversations with each of the mayoral candidates about how they plan to address the city's housing crisis. Stay with us.
In Focus with Cheryl Wills, a weekly show discussing decisions and potential solutions for issues making an impact in your community and your city. If it's important to New Yorkers, then it's being talked about here. In Focus with Cheryl Wills, Sunday mornings at 10:30 on New York One.
It's only a slice. It's only made possible by Spectrum, connecting businesses of all sizes, like small businesses, instantly serving up orders and inventory on the Spectrum Fiber broadband network, and factories, seamlessly connecting to farmers in the field with tailored solutions that always deliver. It's only a slice. It's only everything. Get your business free fiber-powered internet forever. Call to find out how.
I'm Chris Jakovic. I served in the United States Air Force, and I deployed 3 times. So in 2017, I was serving as an Air Force First Sergeant. Our motto in that role is, my job is people, everyone is my business. But unfortunately in that year, I would lose my own brother, Lance Corporal Adam Jakovic, to suicide. The majority of veteran suicides are from guns. I store my weapons securely, not only for myself, but for my family. My service never stops.
At Spectrum Noticias, we recognize that our New York City community is vibrant and diverse.
Spectrum Noticias delivers balanced coverage of the stories that matter in our communities and across the country.
Our journalists are based in the neighborhoods we cover, ensuring you get in-depth reporting on what's happening in the places we call home.
So join us at Spectrum Noticias. We're always on, always there for you.
Now available on your TV. Check your local listings. Also available on the Spectrum News app.
Welcome back to our special coverage as we gear up for Election Day on Tuesday. For many New Yorkers, the most pressing concern in this year's race for mayor is the city's affordable housing crisis. The city's vacancy rate stands at 1.4%, the lowest ever recorded since 1968. About half of renter households are rent burdened, meaning they spend 30% or more of their annual income just to pay the rent. The median asking rent in the city right now is more than $4,000 a month. That's according to Street Easy. Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani has seized on the issue and stands apart from the rest of the field with a promise to freeze the rents on rent-stabilized apartments. During an interview last month, when we walked the streets of Astoria, Queens, Mamdani told me about his multi-pronged strategy to tackle housing, from freezing rent to overhauling the city's property tax system. Here's part of that conversation.
The time has come for a change to our property tax system. And I say that as someone who serves on the Real Property Tax Committee in the State Assembly, as someone who has looked at this system, sought to introduce legislation to augment this system, and yet been told that the scale of this is one where the Assembly, the Senate, Albany in general is waiting for the vision of the mayor.
Okay.
And you know, this is a mayor right now we have who said that he would fix the property tax system within 100 days of taking office.
That was in that 100 days promise?
That's what, that was 100.
He pulled it off the websites. I didn't remember.
100 days promise.
Uh-huh.
And what we've seen instead is that he sought to defend the system in court and lost time and time again.
Wow.
The previous mayor put together a commission that released its findings on the final day of the administration.
Sure.
And I think what we see is that it's a property tax system that is widely understood to be inequitable, and it also has real ramifications around rental properties, as well as the ability to produce the mass scale of housing that we need to. Because a successful housing platform is one that speaks to all 8.5 million New Yorkers who call the city home. Rent stabilization, that applies to about 2.5 million New Yorkers. Home ownership, it's another about 1 million New Yorkers. And there are a number close to maybe 2.5 for market rate tenants, and so on and so forth. And so what we need is a multi-pronged approach. Yes, we need to freeze rents for rent stabilized tenants for 4 years. We also need to take action on the doubling of insurance costs for affordable housing providers over the last few years. And I'm quite interested in looking at the prospect of something like Milford Street Captive, which is an approach to reduce those insurance costs. What could be achieved if the city intervened in a significant way? If we looked at the water bill and said, instead of the Adams approach of raising it to the highest it's been in 13 years, and the approach of supporting Con Edison's request to raise gas and electric by $65 a month, that we instead understood affordability to also apply to homeowners. And this goes back to my experience as a foreclosure prevention housing counselor. You know, there would be a day when the city would release a list of all of the, how's it going? Have a nice day. There would be a day when the city would release a list of property owners delinquent on water and property tax bills. Right. And that day it would have their name, it would have their addresses, and I would speak to New Yorkers who would start to be harassed on that very day by people looking to buy their properties in cash. I spoke, one client told me that they were being followed in the grocery store.
Wow.
And so what I did, sorry, man. What I did was I built a list coming off of my experience working in local politics of what we call turf, where I would go and knock on these doors myself to ask them, did they know they could enroll into a zero-down Department of Finance program, get out of this property tax lien sale? And I met one man who only spoke Urdu, which I happened to speak. We had a conversation. He had no idea that this lien was about to be sold. No idea he was about to be put on a fast track for foreclosure. And it showed me the ramifications of a Giuliani-era policy that we have not only allowed but maintained, which we see that also has ramifications for racial justice in this city, where the city has been shown to be 6 times more likely to sell that lien in a black neighborhood than a white neighborhood. And so that is also the same part of the affordability agenda as freezing the rent, as taking on insurance costs, as going to Albany with a property tax reform vision.
Our Courtney Gross joins me now in studio to talk more about each candidate's housing plan. Good evening, Courtney. What do you make of the Mamdani proposals?
So it's interesting that he spent so much time when you were walking around Astoria with him talking about property tax reform, because that is something that we've heard and would expect to hear from someone like the Republican candidate, Curtis Sliwa. But Mamdani is right about one thing, is that I can recall in my decades of covering City Hall now that many mayors in the past have proposed to reform property taxes and have done so unsuccessfully. And it is an unfair system, most would say, all across the country. So it's not surprising that perhaps he wants to tackle that as well. But of course, we know his main proposal when it comes to affordable housing is freezing the rent. And we already have a threat from the current mayor to appoint some people to the Rent Guidelines Board that could potentially derail that promise, because Mamdani has said that he wants to freeze the rent within the first 4 years, or the first 4 years of his potential mayoralty. So he could have a lot of challenges ahead.
Yes. In addition to freezing the rent, assuming he gets that or doesn't get it, that's a separate political fight. I was really struck by how conversant he was with the property tax system, the insurance problems. And it was a reminder that despite what one of his opponents has said, oh, he's never had a job, he was a foreclosure prevention specialist and actually learned about a pretty complicated system.
Yeah, and that is a huge issue that we saw a number of years ago, or a decade or so ago, obviously, with the housing bubble that burst and the amount of foreclosures I can recall covering in Queens. And I assume his time overlapped during that particular moment when we saw so many people going into foreclosure. It shows that the affordable housing crisis and the housing crisis in the city is multifaceted, and in order to really tackle it and solve it, you have to come at it from multiple approaches, and that's building affordable housing. That's, from his approach or his ideas to freeze the rent is a possibility, and then obviously property tax reform too.
Andrew Cuomo's plan is to increase housing supply across the 5 boroughs. I met up with the former governor over the summer in his old neighborhood of Hollis, Queens. He broke down his strategy to build more housing. Here's part of that conversation. What would you do? How do you make this available to the next generation?
Oh, the problem is, I agree with him on the problem. And by the way, he didn't figure out the problem. Jimmy McMillan, 2010.
I remember that debate.
The rent is too damn
Yes.
high.
Yes.
The best line of the entire debate.
I remember that.
And the best response in every forum was that Jimmy McMillan, the rent is too damn high. So affordability has been a problem. That is a fault of the government. Now, there's short-term solutions. The Erstat law could be repealed, allow New York City to regulate its rents. When he now says freeze the rent, people think he's talking about their rent. No, he's not talking about their rent.
No.
He's talking about only rent-stabilized units, right?
Sure.
And you can only do that for so long. When we took the walk before, a fella came up to me and he said, I own a small building with rent-stabilized units. My property taxes went up, my heat went up, all the costs went up.
Right.
I'm going to go give the building back to the bank, right? But repeal Erstat and increase the rent regulation and the Rent Guideline Board factors, et cetera. But long-term, the answer is you don't have the supply. You're not building housing. It takes you 4 years in New York City to get a building permit. I built LaGuardia Airport in 4 years. Right? It can't be. You need a massive construction effort like you've never seen before. Open all the valves. Rebuild NYCHA, which, by the way, public housing authorities all across the country have rebuilt much better and much faster than NYCHA. I worked on the Chicago Housing Authority, which was the worst housing authority in the United States. So you have NYCHA. You have faith-based organizations that own land. You have city-owned land. You have rezoning on industrial properties. Open it all up. Hundreds of projects going on immediately. Forget HPD and trying to figure that out. Let the mayor do it. But you have to get the supply up. Your 1% vacancy rate, yes, the rent is too damn high. And artificially just saying to landlords, well, you're going to eat the cost. I know it feeds the stereotype, evil, rich landlord, but that is not sustainable, right? the real answer is build more housing quickly, affordable certainly, but even market rate. Because if there was more market rate, you start to bring down the cost.
Courtney Gross joins me again, and he has unique credibility when it comes to this notion of let's build a lot right now.
Yeah, I think we have evidence of that all across the city, whether it's from the multiple bridges within our area, the downstate area, the Mario Cuomo Bridge, or just take a look at LaGuardia Airport. I mean, if there's something, some notch or something on Andrew Cuomo's resume that he can hand out to all New Yorkers, it's that he knows how to build things. So when he has a campaign promise, like I'm going to build 500,000, build or preserve 500,000 units of housing over the course of 10 years, I think a lot of New Yorkers will say, he'll probably accomplish that given his record. It is build or preserve 500,000 units, and 2/3 of that would be affordable housing. A distinction I think that Andrew Cuomo makes when you compare to Mamdani's affordable housing plan and the creation of affordable housing he wants to do, which is 200,000 units for low-income New Yorkers. Andrew Cuomo doesn't make that distinction necessarily. Yes, he says the majority of the housing he wants to build will be affordable housing, but you heard him say at the end of the interview there is, all housing is good housing. If it's market rate housing, it's middle income housing, it's low income housing, that means that we're going to end up handling or tackling that very low vacancy rate and hopefully increasing that vacancy rate because we'll have more supply.
Yes, sure. If supply and demand still exist, then obviously increasing the supply will eventually bring down the cost. One thing that we know, though, and this is something that is different from the governor's powers as a governor, ex-governor, is that, you know, you have to fight this neighborhood by neighborhood. You've got to build project labor agreements. That means negotiating with a bunch of unions, and they want as much as they can get. And there are a lot of different pressures that will keep the prices up in getting housing built.
Yeah, and I think that's why he supports something like the housing ballot proposals that are going to be on your ballot when you go to vote over the weekend or on election day. Those ballot proposals are to spur and fast track a lot of affordable housing in specific community districts or modest affordable housing in other districts, which is why he is the only candidate thus far, we should say major candidate, out of Zohran Mamdani, Curtis Sliwa, and Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo was the only one to say, I support these ballot measures. We should note Mamdani has been asked, I think, daily on the campaign trail as of this point whether he supports it, and he just will not say.
Okay, let's talk now about the third candidate. Republican Curtis Sliwa has a plan that focuses on keeping local leaders in charge of zoning decisions and encouraging more home ownership. A few weeks ago, I met up with Sliwa in Brownsville, Brooklyn, where he detailed his ideas. Here's part of that conversation. What do you take from your time here as a young man that you would bring to City Hall?
Well, first off, Republicans never come here. Never have. Rudy didn't in his heyday. Bloomberg didn't. They just avoid it, assuming that everybody is a Democrat or they don't vote. There's just a lot of people just don't vote. And because I've lived here and I've dealt with people from Brownsville and East New York and Canarsie, I call it the trifecta, the Trinity, because I've lived all three places. I can never forget that the same problems are still plaguing them. Now, up there used to be the burned out tenements. When the Bronx was on fire, burning, this part of Brooklyn was burning.
Yeah.
And they built the Nehemiah homes, much better improvement. People had, you know, personal space. Those co-ops opposite our headquarters, my uncle, Jimmy Scalvone, was a butcher. The union funds went into establishing co-ops. You look at that building, how many years later?
Yeah,
good
solid,
shape.
Solid, yeah.
Well maintained.
Yeah.
It's what I said should be in the projects. People should have ownership of their apartments. Ownership will lead to them getting more involved. Even if they're poor and indigent, I don't care if it's $5, $10. I mean, about 30% have to pay rent based on, you know, how much they're making. You know, they have to pay 30%. But the point is, ownership changes everything. Co-ops, condos. You look at all that. The chairman of HUD at that time, Jack Kemp, in Reagan time, Republican. Great idea, ownership. And guess who shot it down? Not the Democrats, the Republicans.
Right.
Because their attitude is, well, maybe these people can't handle it. What are you talking about they can't handle it? You know they have tenant councils. They used to have tenant patrols. in the toughest projects, you'd have to come in and sign in, and it'd be mostly grandmas downstairs. You'd have to sign in, and if you didn't have business there, if you didn't know somebody there, they turn you away. There's a grandmother standing up to the Jowie Stompers and the Tomahawks. And believe it or not, those guys would stay away. So I saw all that firsthand. I know what works. I know what doesn't work, obviously. The school systems, a lot of children here who need alternative schools, vocational training. By fourth grade, a lot of these kids cannot read, write, or do math at grade level. And I remember in Gildersleeve Junior High School, where I went to in Canarsie, you had a guidance counselor. By 8th grade, that guidance counselor would sit you down. Curtis, do you ever think of culinary, art, metal shop, wood shop? You ever think, there are a lot of good schools like Westinghouse, downtown Brooklyn, here are all the skills. What they were politely telling you, and in your best interest, is maybe academically, you weren't going to get your Regents credits. Because back then we had 3 graduation certificates. You had, obviously, Regents, vocational, you had a lot more vacational training, and you had the degree, you got the graduation certificate, general they called it, which meant you inhaled and exhaled. And through social promotion you got through, which benefited nobody.
Right. Let's bring our Courtney Gross back in. What are your thoughts about his housing plan?
So we are very few on the details. We know that in other interviews, he's talked about property tax reform. He has talked about, Curtis Lewa has talked about renovating commercial spaces in Manhattan and turning them over into residential spaces. Obviously, a very similar strategy and similar proposal that the Eric Adams administration has pushed forward. And he's really talked about home ownership, like you heard him speak to you about in Brooklyn, how important it is for the city not to neglect homeowners. I think that's why he discusses the property tax system, because more often than not, at least from other campaigns, Mamdani for one, Mamdani doesn't talk about home ownership all that much. He really focuses much of his attention on renters. And I think Curtis Lewa, the Republican, you're often going to hear him talk about property tax burden, and the inequity of that system.
Yeah, and when it comes to ownership options for low-income New Yorkers, it's sort of startling, and there's a host of problems that would come up, but the idea of turning over public housing and converting it essentially into co-ops or condos and allowing ownership by the residents hasn't been talked about in decades, but not a completely crazy idea.
That was just what I was going to say. It's not completely a crazy idea considering where the federal government is and how much money and funding they're going to be giving to NYCHA in the coming years under the Trump administration.
Yeah. And then I guess finally, when it comes to those ballot proposals, Curtis Lewa is a hard no. He's saying local communities should have an up or down veto power over new development. And when you start doing the numbers, well, if you think you can convert 20,000 units or you want to build a few here, and even if you got the conversion of the public housing units, is it enough to really sort of move the needle on the high cost of housing in New York?
I don't think he's looking at it from that high-level perspective of the number of units created. I mean, he is very much against the city of yes, and that is the proposal that the Adams administration and the council passed to spur the creation of affordable housing all across the city in different neighborhoods through a bunch of different zoning mechanisms. And really, the ballot proposals are somewhat of a seen as an extension of that. Therefore, Curtis Lewa says, no, kind of not in my backyard. We want to be able to have control over what happens in our communities and in our neighborhoods.
Okay, thanks very much for all of your analysis, Courtney. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we'll take a look at what else is on the ballot. From the city council races to the ballot questions on housing, that will all be on the ballot. Stay with us.
The next downtown local 6 train to Brooklyn Bridge City Hall will arrive in 2 minutes.
After 30 years of forecasting for New York, I've learned it takes a dedicated team to cover all the weather our city has to offer.
I'm so honored to be a meteorologist here at New York One because as a Brooklyn kid, this is the station that I grew up watching. Morning, noon, or night, our team is here to bring you accurate forecasts you can count on, from severe weather updates to our weather on the ones. Watch the New York One weather experts on your TV and on the go with the Spectrum News app.
Your entertainment the way you want it. With Spectrum TV, all these streaming apps are included at no extra cost. So you can watch anything. Movies, series, sports, reality, news.
Here's a look at today's top stories.
Exclusive originals.
We await your orders.
And even more of your favorites with live TV. Stream across your devices and enjoy anywhere.
See you later.
Get it all with Spectrum TV.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Two milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
The sad reality is fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kitchen now.
My father was a New York City firefighter. My mission, like his, is to serve New Yorkers in a city that doesn't stop when the sun goes down. Being with New York One since the beginning, I'm now honored to join you even earlier each weeknight. Starting at 8 with New York Tonight, we'll explore the latest news developments, followed by New York One at 10 to wrap up your day. So join me each weeknight starting at 8 right here on New York One.
Welcome back to our special coverage leading up to Election Day. In addition to the race for mayor, there are also several ballot proposals that are up for a vote. One measure deals with ski-related facilities at Adirondack State Park. Another deals with moving city elections to the presidential election year. Our Bernadette Hogan took a look at those proposals and has the details in this report.
A ski trail?
There are enough places that they don't have to take parkland away to do that. And I voted no on that.
Someone from Lake Placid could be voting on my issues, and we don't relate.
On November 4th, voters across the state will decide whether they'll approve a ballot proposal aimed at letting the state government convert woods into ski trails in rural Essex County.
Does it mean we're going to lose trails here?
No.
Well, then I don't know why we're voting for it, but, you know, I would be okay with them getting some more trails. I like trails, you know. I think it's good to walk, it's good to hike. If they get some more trails, I'm fine for that, as long as it doesn't mean we have to close Central Park because we can't afford to have both.
It lets New York's Olympic Regional Development Authority build on 350 acres worth of protected forest near Lake Placid, requiring the state to purchase 2,500 acres to give back. But there's a catch. It's asking voters to greenlight construction that already happened, starting in 2021.
We had discovered mid-construction that they were doing things on state land that were not permitted by the Constitution.
The 6 million acre Adirondack Forest Preserve is protected by the state constitution under the Forever Wild Clause. Environmental advocate John Sheehan said cutting down trees for ski trails and a storage shed was a problem, but he helped strike a bargain, a constitutional amendment.
That would give us the opportunity to not only clean up the past constitutional violations, but also make sure that nothing like that happened again in the future.
City voters get a say because all constitutional changes require a vote by state residents.
In many cases, it is hard to distinguish this Olympic property from the forest preserve around it.
Another ballot proposal would change city elections held during odd years, like mayor, comptroller, and public advocate, to even years, when presidential and gubernatorial elections are held.
The origin of this election calendar is actually in trying to defeat Tammany Hall, the old party machine.
Advocates say it'll save the city and state money by consolidating elections. And most importantly,
we've seen several states do that, and what we've seen in all these places, that voter turnout for local offices doubles, or sometimes even more than doubles.
If passed, the state legislature must still approve a new law 2 years in a row, signed by the governor. Then it'll go again to voters statewide as a constitutional amendment.
We will draw a much younger electorate, and an electorate that is much more representative of the city as a whole. So the largest benefits will go to communities of color and to younger voters.
A separate measure consolidating odd and even year elections for offices outside the 5 boroughs was already approved by the state legislature, but opposed by Republicans who argue it will grant Democrats an advantage. Bernadette Hogan, New York 1.
Also on the ballot on Tuesday are 3 measures related to the city's housing and land use review process. And depending on your district, you could be voting for a new city council member as well. Our Bobby Kuza joins us now with a look at all of those races. Good evening, Bobby.
Good evening, Errol. A lot of excitement with the mayor's race, maybe a little bit less excitement with some of these down-ballot races. 51 city council seats, they are all technically on the ballot, but 16 of them are uncontested. So there's literally just one name on the ballot. You don't really have much of a choice. A lot of the other races are not really too competitive, but there are 3 in particular that we're going to be watching really closely on election night. One of them is District 13 in the Bronx. This is where the incumbent is the Republican, Christy Marmorato. This is a seat that used to be Democratic. The Republicans just flipped it, and now the Democrats want to win it back. So that's Christy Marmorato on your left. The Democrat in this race is Shirley Aldeball. So she is hoping to unseat Marmorato and flip that seat blue. So that is an incumbent, obviously. Then there's a couple of seats that are open that feature some pretty competitive races. One of them is in Queens. This is the district currently held by Robert Holden, who is a Democrat. This is Rego Park, Middle Village, Ridgewood, part of Maspeth. And this is kind of an interesting one because both of the candidates who you see on your screen there actually work on Robert Holden's staff. So these people both work together. One of them is the Democrat Phil Wong, the Republican Alicia Vicunas, and so that seat is going to remain in the hands of a Holden staffer. We just don't know which party they belong to. And then out in southern Brooklyn, District 47, this is the seat currently held by Justin Brannan, who is also term limited out of office. His staffer, one of his staffers, his chief counsel, Kayla Santasuoso, is running. That's her on the right. She's running against a Republican, George Sarantopoulos. This is a pretty competitive race as well, and that's kind of a purplish district. Very diverse communities in Bay Ridge, also goes out to Coney Island. So those are the 3 we're really going to be keeping a close eye on election night. Not a lot of suspense elsewhere in these council races.
Okay, now one of the issues, as I alluded to, are these ballot questions that deal with housing, and that is going to actually outlive whoever gets elected next Tuesday, right? I mean, it's really sort of an important way to sort of maybe change the way we do business in New York.
And we all know that housing is a huge crisis here in the city, and all 3 of these ballot questions, they each do something a little bit different, but they would make it easier to build affordable housing here in the city. These have become controversial in part because particular question 4 on the ballot would diminish the city council's power over land use decisions. And right now there's something known as member deference, where the individual city council member has a lot of power to basically veto any major development project in their district. This would create a mechanism to basically override that. So what you see is a lot of city council members, even though they might be progressives who are pro-housing, they're against these ballot proposals because it's going to take some of their power away. Meanwhile, you also have people who are maybe more on the right end of the spectrum, these sort of more conservative NIMBY, so-called NIMBY communities, not in my backyard, who are also against them, which is why you've been seeing, a lot of advocacy, a lot of mail around this. But 2 through 4 all have to do with housing. They're all backed by the mayor and by a lot of advocacy groups.
Okay, and there's a race for Manhattan District Attorney. That one has gotten actually national attention, hasn't it?
Yes, because Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA, has become something of a lightning rod, particularly for Republicans who have blamed him for this sort of soft on crime approach. Also, we should remember he's the one who prosecuted Donald Trump in that criminal case, although Alvin Bragg hasn't talked a lot about that on the campaign trail. So that is really the only competitive DA's race that we're going to be watching. That'll be an interesting one on Tuesday night.
Okay, thanks very much, Bobby. New York One hosted a series of conversations and debates last month with various races citywide, including the race for mayor. Candidates Zoran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa all faced off at LaGuardia Community College. Here's some of what they had to say.
It's us versus the insiders and the billionaires. It's us versus Cuomo. It's us versus Zoran.
I will end this hate-mongering and division that is tearing this city apart.
My opponents, who spend more time trying to convince the other to drop out than actually proposing their own policies, will speak only of the past, because that's all that they know. I am the sole candidate running with a vision for the future.
Zoran, your resume could fit on a cocktail napkin, and Andrew, your failures could fill a public school library.
You don't know how to run a government, you don't know how to handle an emergency, and you've literally never proposed a bill on anything that you're not talking about in your campaign.
We just had a former governor say in his own words that the city has been getting screwed by the state. Who was leading the state? It was you.
Governor Hochul.
You were leading the state for 10 years.
The only reason that Zoran is on the stage is because of the failed Governor Cuomo, who was rejected by the Democrats in the primary and rejected by 13 women who charged you with sexual harassment. Do you ever know that no means no?
There were allegations of sexual harassment. They were then went to 5 district attorneys, fully litigated for 4 years. The cases were dropped.
I'm appreciative that those measures will be on the ballot and that New Yorkers will be able to cast their votes for them. I know that we desperately need to build more housing in this city, and I also know that the jobs we create in the building of that housing should be good jobs as well.
What a political answer. What is your opinion, Zoran?
Yes or no?
Come on.
Yes or no?
What is your opinion?
Myself, number 1, and Curtis, number 2.
Mr. Sliwa.
Oh, please don't be glazing me here, Zoran. Are you kidding?
Mr. Sliwa, do you have an
I
answer?
support ranked choice voting, but I'd only vote for myself.
Mr. Cuomo?
I love that Zoran and Curtis ticket idea. I don't know, I'm just enamored with it. I would just rank myself.
And while there is no ranked choice voting in this election, you can still make sure that you vote. If you want to catch this debate in full, you should watch it on our website, ny1.com, or on the Spectrum News app, or on our YouTube channel. We also hosted a debate between the 2 candidates running for a city council seat in South Brooklyn, currently occupied by Councilmember Justin Brannan, who is term limited. We also hosted a debate between the 3 candidates on the ballot in the race for Manhattan District Attorney. That's going to do it for tonight's special report. As a reminder, your local polling station will be open starting from 6 a.m. on Tuesday. And keep it right here on New York One for all your election night coverage. We're going to begin at 7 p.m. that night with a special edition of Inside City Hall and continue throughout the night with results coming in after 9 p.m. Thanks so much for watching and have a great evening. Stay tuned for news and weather after a short break.